We continue our study of the Taryag Mitzvot, and we are up to the 159th Mitzvah, and that is the Mitzvah of Tum'at Shemona Shiratzim, which is in Parashat Shemini. The Pasuk comes along and tells us, V'zeh lachem atameh b'sheretz השורץ על הארץ, החולת והעכבר והצב וכו'. In Perek Yud Aleph, Pasuk Chavtet, which means there are 8 specific rodents that the Torah mentions. They're called shiratzim, and these shiratzim have the ability to exude tum'ah. Now, before we go further, in this mitzvah, it's worthy to look it up yourself. You see, the Chinuch goes on a long essay, really telling us that it's beyond us to comprehend the reasons for any of the mitzvot of the Torah, let alone to try to figure out the rules of tum'ah v'tahara, why certain things bring contamination to a person. He says, and there's no way a human could fathom the wisdom of God. After all, Moshe Rabbeinu, who was the greatest prophet, he reached the level of 50 Sharei Binah minus a little. Even Moshe could not reach the highest level during his lifetime. And Shlomo HaMelech, the wisest of all men, when he came to understand the depth of the Torah, he said, V'hi rechoka memeni, that it is distant even from the seichel of Moshe, from Shlomo. All the more so, he says, God is called Ava Chochmah, the source and origin of all wisdom. So how is it possible that human beings with their frail understanding are going to be able to plummet the depths of why HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells us to do something? So he writes then, but that shouldn't cause us not to try to find some logical reasons. He says, I wrote my book. You're going to ask me, what are you writing a book called Sefer HaChinuch? Every mitzvah you explain. He said, I'm not explaining it to its fullest reasoning, obviously, but we're giving a ta'am, a flavor, or a certain, just an understanding that we could connect to. So he says, we have no doubt that when it comes to the laws of Tum'ah, it must be that it causes a spiritual damage to our souls when we come in contact with things that are contaminated. In his language, he says, "V'sarichim anu lehamin shegam harhakat hatum'ah leto'altenu," that even the abstaining from contaminated items is to our benefit. V'inyan hatum'ah, when one contaminates himself, gorem shema'ayenot hasechel mitkalkelim. It causes the pathways of sechel, of intellect, of understanding, of spirituality to become ruined and spoiled. Now, he says, until you understand the nature of your soul, you're really not going to understand the damage that Tum'ah causes. But we have to trust Borei Olam like a doctor that knows certain things that are damaging to the body. Borei Olam obviously wants to keep away from things that can be harmful to the soul. Now let's just review some of the laws that apply. There are 8 shiratzim, 8 different rodents that have the highest level of tum'ah in this category, which is called Ava Tum'ah. Ava Tum'ah means it is able to contaminate if it touches Adam v'kelim. It can contaminate a person, it can also contaminate vessels. Now these shiratzim are only tameh in their death, when they're dead. When they're alive, they do not cause Tum'ah. Furthermore, they are not mitameh in a way called masa. Masa means if you lift it up in a vessel, let's say you didn't actually touch it, it's only mitameh b'negi'ah v'lo b'masa. What's the shi'ur of how much of a sheretz is mitameh? Halakha is b'chadasha, the size of a lentil. Furthermore, all the shiratzim can be mitzaref to the shi'ur. Now let's say you take a little of this sheretz, a little of that one, a little of the other one, you put them together, and now you have a lentil's worth. That is going to be mitameh. What happens once a person touches it? If he's a kohen, he's not allowed to eat terumah. If he's a kohen, he's not allowed to eat kadashim, or he cannot enter the Beit HaMikdash until he goes to the mikveh. This law, says the Chinuch, applies in all places, at all times. Interesting, he says at all times. We'll have to explain that in a minute. It also applies to male and female. Now, what does it mean at all times? It means that if a person today, Bizman Hazeh, touches a dead sheretz, he becomes tameh. That's the reality. Now, although we don't have a Beit HaMikdash, although we're not eating terumah, but he is tameh. And the Chinuch says a big chidush. There's no sin to touch a sheretz. If you touch a sheretz, you become tameh, you go to the mikveh. It's not a sin. But then he tells us, mikol makom, yesh lechol mevin le'archik hatum'ah. You should keep away from tum'ah, ki hanefesh mit'aleh betahara. Because the soul gets elevated in purity. So it might not be forbidden, but it's not advisable. Why would you want to come in contact with something that causes you to need to go to a mikveh unless you have to? So therefore he says, even today, one would try to keep away, even though we have tum'ah already. But why would you want to add more tum'ah to the tum'ah you have? Therefore one should keep away. Now there is a famous question. I know your rabbi is an expert in Ibn Ubahya, but there's a famous question that Ibn Ubahya asks in Vayikra Perek Yud Aleph Pasuk Lamed, and that is, we know that one of the most tameh and one of the most problematic of all rodents has to be the snake, has to be the nahash. After all, the nahash is what got us into all this mess that we're in today. Nahash Kadmon, the snake that seduced Chava and then Adam to eat from the tree. But guess what, says Ibn Ubahya? It's not one of the 8. How is that possible? How could the worst of all the shiratzim, the nahash, with all that it did, and you're telling me that if a snake dies and somebody touches it, he does not become tameh. But if you touch one of the other ones, a lizard or whatever they're called, you become tameh. He says, it can't be. So he says something incredible. He says it's based on the rule of deracheha darche noam v'chol netivoteha shalom. The Torah is a pleasant Torah and all its ways are peaceful. And therefore, snakes in general are dangerous. And therefore, we don't want to have snakes. We want to, you know what we want to do with snakes? We want to kill the snakes and get rid of them. But if the Torah would have said that if you kill a snake, you're going to become tameh, so what's going to happen? People are not going to want to kill snakes. And therefore, we're going to have these dangerous rodents running around and damaging people. So therefore, to incentivize people to kill them, Borei Olam says, don't worry, you're not going to become tameh if you touch the snake. And therefore, bi'artara mikerbecha. Now, it's true. This rule would also apply to the scorpion. The scorpion is akrab. It's also very dangerous. So why doesn't the Torah forbid it? L'gabei tumah. Same reason. So people will not be shy to kill them, because they'll know that even if they kill it, it's not going to bring them to tum'ah. But the Chinuch reminds us, and we'll conclude with this, that even though the snake and the scorpion does not exude tum'ah for the reasons that we mentioned, they are still forbidden bi-isur achila. Of course, one would not allowed to eat any of the 8 shiratzim, including the ones that are not mentioned as well. So again, it's a reminder that even though we're living bizman hazeh, where we really are all basically temeim in one way or the other, but one should try to still preserve as much as he can, not to be mosif tum'ah, and even if a person goes to the mikveh, he's mosif tahara, he's mosif kedusha, and definitely it has a benefit to the ma'ayanot, the chokhmah.